It's time to go beyond the headlines, cause I don't put in overtime just so I can headline, okay. Now it's Fox Sports, I'm live with Renee. Going hard every day, sports rapping every play. Different segments for your favorites, coming at you daily. With positive vibes, yeah, we some game changers. Basketball, football, soccer, with different interviews, you never know who may pop up. Listen, only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines. Only on Beyond the Headlines, this is Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington.
Joining us this week on Beyond the Headlines with Renee Washington to get into all things NBA. We've got Nate Duncan, the NBA scout and attorney, play-by-play analyst, and co-host on Hollinger and Duncan's podcast. Nate, welcome to the show.
Hey, happy to be making my debut, Renee. How are you?
I am great. I'm happy to have you here, and I'm excited to get your thoughts on a lot of things going on across the league. And most recently, something that we've been hearing a lot of buzz around is the thoughts on the proposed schedule changes being discussed for the 2021-2022 season. And with that, they're talking about cutting down the amount of regular season games to about 78 or 79, reseeding the semifinals, and once we get to the playoffs based on the regular season record, playing a mini tournament for the 7 to 10 seeds, almost like what we see with March Madness, where they have to play into the playoffs, and then also having an in-season tournament similar to what the Champions League does, and that would be in the middle of the season. So a lot of different ideas being tossed around. What are your initial thoughts on these changes and the direction that league is looking to move in?
Yeah, we can start with the simple one. I think the reseeding of the conference finals is pretty much a good one. You might lose some conference rivalries, but the NBA Finals is the showcase for the NBA, and so having the two best teams there seems like pretty much a no-brainer to me. The play-in tournament as well seems like it would be interesting. It'll keep teams trying to get that 10th seed in it longer, so they won't be tanking and just hopefully improve the quality of regular season basketball at the end, and hopefully be an exciting winner-take-all tournament similar to what we saw in 2018 with the Nuggets and Wolves playing each other just coincidentally on the last day of the season for a ride to the playoffs. And then the midseason tournament, if you just won the championship the year before, are you really going to push that hard to win this tournament in around Thanksgiving and early December? Maybe not, but think of how many teams are out there that just never win anything, right? That are just desperate for anything to market to their fans. I think those teams would try.
That's a really good point, because the first thing I thought, and we'll talk about the in-season tournament, the first thing I thought is the Champions League, what makes it such a big draw is that it's the best teams and players from around the world. And with the NBA being a closed league, they're not going to play other teams outside of the NBA. So they're playing against other NBA opponents, and what is the compelling attraction to that? But you bring up a good point, and it would give other teams something to play for, aside from the usual big franchises that are competing in championships year in and year out. It's a good thought.
Yeah, and maybe they could have some benefit to it where you get an extra regular season win or two to help you for playoff seeding, or there's some kind of a monetary incentive as well. Maybe that's what it could be. I mean, I think it's kind of more similar to the domestic cup competition in Europe, but those leagues don't have playoffs, so that's a little bit different. You're not competing with a whole other playoffs. But the hope is it'll be during a time early in the season when some of these teams that have had disappointing starts can give it a shot. If you're the Charlotte Hornets or the Memphis Grizzlies or the Phoenix Suns, maybe one of these teams that just hasn't even made the playoffs in years, Sacramento Kings, maybe you can make a little bit of noise in this thing, and it becomes interesting.
Yeah, and I think also with that, the play-in tournament for the 7 to 10 seeds of each conference, I think also adds that same type of feel, because it allows teams, much like with what we see with March Madness, those teams that are, that are just on the cut of making the NCAA tournament, but now they can still say they made it to the postseason. It adds an incentive and something to add on to your resume for those teams, as well as allowing, and this is something I know I've had a lot of conversations with, almost expanding the playoffs, since we have so many teams on both sides that you can't even easily say these are the clear-cut 1 through 8 seeds. There are in each conference 12 teams that are, or I wouldn't say 11, 12, but 9-10 teams that are easily on any given day could be in the playoffs, depending on how injuries and things like that shake out. So it almost expands the playoffs as a whole, which could definitely be a benefit. What are your thoughts on shortening the regular season? That's something that has been discussed a lot for the longevity of these athletes that are playing 80-plus games in regular season on top of the playoff year in and year out.
Well, I think what has occurred to me is the players are already shortening the regular season for themselves. And not even really the players. The players want to play, right? Like, it's really the teams that know that these players need rest if they're going to avoid injury, and more important, be fresh for that grueling playoff crucible that's 2 months long at the end of the year. And so if players really can only play, because the game is much harder now than it used to be. I mean, there were more hard fouls back then, but, the game took place in a 15-foot radius around the basket. Now it's a 24-foot radius around the basket. Teams are playing faster. You have to just cover way more ground. There's more ball movement, more player movement. It's just not possible to play the same number of minutes and same number of games. So if players can only really play 72 games, that you're just basically enforcing another 10 games on the fans where the best players just aren't going to be able to play, and nobody wants that anymore. And so I think this idea that they're going to make more money with these bad quality games, I don't think that's accurate anymore. My personal proposal has been 58 games. You just play each team twice, play twice a week. That also helps you as far as like fantasy. Now, if you're doing a season-long fantasy, it'd be like, oh, well, this guy's playing 5 games this week, and this guy's playing 2, so should I start this guy? So I think it's definitely reducing it is good. They can't just reduce it all the way down to 66 or 58 or whatever, but this is maybe just dipping their toe in the water of that a little bit, and then when the new collective bargaining agreement comes around, probably in 2023, they'll have the data on this to say how it's worked, and maybe they can make more radical changes at that time.
Yeah, those are some really great points, because I wasn't even thinking, if this is to cut back on the load management side of things, what's to say that players still aren't going to be managed in terms of their times, minutes, their games played? So now in an 86 regular season schedule, they're not playing all of those games. They're missing, let's say, 10 or 11. So now with the 7 or 8 or 78 or 79 games, who's to say they're still playing all those games? And on top of that, I do like the idea of supply and demand. If you have 2 games a week, I know, like, I could turn on the TV any given day and I can watch certain teams. Like the Lakers will be on. Whoever I want to watch is going to be on. But if now I know that if they're not on every night, you have to act, for fan purposes in terms of buying tickets, I think it could be very beneficial for everyone aside from just the players. But I do.
Hey, it'll make my job easier.
Yeah. That's the other thing. There are a lot of other people that, like yourself, that are constantly, whether it's through traveling every game or traveling every week to different states, whatever it may be, there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time ripping and running throughout the season, which is a year-long thing. So I do want to get into some players. Got to start with the Mavs. Luka Doncic. My goodness, the NBA Rookie of the Year last year comes back this year. He said he's even surprising himself with his early success in year 2. He's averaging 30 points a game, 10 rebounds, 9 assists in the first 16 games coming into this week. Of course, by Tuesday night after we've had this conversation, that those numbers could change when they play the Clippers. But he just dropped 41 points and 10 assists in their win over the Rockets, and he right now is he's not just a household name. I think he's someone that everyone is talking about because he's surprising a lot of us. Are you surprised at all by his sophomore season and how he started off even stronger than what we've seen in the past to be a top player so far?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly had last year one of the greatest seasons ever by a 19-year-old. Now he's having one of the greatest, maybe the greatest season ever by a 20-year-old. Obviously, it's early, but some of the advanced stats that have him best in the league, close to best of all time at this rate so far. And I think the two things that maybe were underestimated is just how fatigued he was at the end of last year after he's played so much basketball. And then number 2, what a difference it would make for him getting into real NBA shape, really starting to tone his body up, which wasn't something that he really did much in Europe. And then the addition of Kristaps Porzingis, I think, has really helped him. Porzingis, individually, his numbers aren't that great, but he's someone that your center has to guard 25 feet from the basket. And so now Luka can use his size and get to the rim in a way that he wasn't able to last year when they had DeAndre Jordan a lot of the time, a big center, kind of mucking up their spacing. So those are the reasons why he's been able to do this, and obviously just his own individual skill development as well. Hard to believe he'll keep up exactly this pace, but he's not doing it with like crazy three-point shooting or something like that. Like, this does seem relatively sustainable. I think he's looking like he's going to be at the very minimum in the MVP conversation this year.
Yeah. I mean, already to start off the season, his name has been in the conversation, and rightfully so. I mean, he's had 30-plus point games, 6 of the last 8 games that he was out coming into this week. And you talk about what him and Porzingis do together. I know a lot of people were wondering, with all the different moves that we saw in the offseason, how these duos would play off of each other. And these two, I mean, Luka's definitely the number one guy, but it's all a lot, as you mentioned, because of Porzingis, what he opens up for him. The two of them, you now can't just focus on Luka. You have to make sure that you're focusing on Kristaps Porzingis as well. So the balance of those two is and how they play off of each other and together has been very fun to watch. So
totally.
There's another duo that everyone was concerned about, and I don't know why, because I'm a LeBron fan, so I knew this was going to work out perfectly. But LeBron James, coming off of his first year without going to the postseason in a decade, and Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard coming into the mix, everything is going right for the Lakers. Now, do you think they can continue being the best team in the league? It's November. Everyone's always been questioning injuries and the longevity of the season. Looking at how they've started off this season, I know it's only November, so I will take that with a grain of salt with whatever you say. But what are your thoughts in terms of long-term how this Lakers squad is going to continue to develop and progress at the top of the league?
I don't believe they're going to finish with the best record necessarily in the West or in the NBA. And I think if you look at some of the advanced stats, their net rating, for example, they're not quite as high. They've had a lot of close wins. They haven't had the toughest schedule in the world. I mean, for example, they had very close wins over OKC and Memphis over the weekend. So they haven't been absolutely dominating a lot of the way. They also had a close win over the Bulls, for example, on the road. They haven't played a lot of great teams yet. I do like the Clippers a little bit better at full strength. I might like the Bucks a little bit better. I can't wait to see those two teams match up. But, yeah, they've been doing it defensively, which has been really impressive. And Anthony Davis playing at the 4. They've gotten a renaissance from Dwight Howard. Your guy LeBron is playing much better defensively than he did last year. So I think that's the biggest thing that people didn't anticipate is this is going to be a pretty good defensive team. Now, they have trended down a little bit in the last couple of weeks since Rondo came back. He's a pretty bad defensive player at this point, so that'll be something to watch. How much are they going to play him? I think the biggest thing that could torpedo them is just the rotations with Kuzma, Rondo. Those guys are more scorers. They also need the ball more. They're not as good defensively. Caruso is not as heralded, but he maybe is playing better than those guys. Avery Bradley has been pretty good for them as well. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So are they going to go with defense and support players? Or are they going to go with some of the flashier names who are better offensively? Frank Vogel is going to have a lot of work to do with that rotation as the year goes forward, but can't complain about the start by any means.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I mean, you bring up a good point. It's still early. We're still seeing how things play out. Their schedule has not been the strongest, so this true test is coming down the line. But, I mean, they are at least, top in offense and defense in the league, and, of course, having a strong record so far. They're still pulling out those wins at the end of the day. It's close games are close games, but not everybody can squeeze out those wins, and they're doing it.
Yeah, and they really needed this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they really needed this type of a start, I think. After last year, after all the drama in the organization, a new coach, they didn't get the coach that they wanted. They have the Jason Kidd behind Vogel kind of waiting in the wings that things didn't go that well. Anthony Davis could be a free agent. They needed to come out and not disappoint at the start of the season. And hopefully that means that LeBron is going to have enough energy left at the end. But for right now, this is important that they have this kind of a start.
And even take it a step further and say with all that is going on, not only does the success allow them to have that confidence, you look at their post-game press conferences, the interview, everything that they're doing, they're having fun, they're enjoying it right now, and on top of that, this is giving them a chance to kind of figure out their roles. I know, as we talk about with AD and LeBron, but even with Dwight Howard and all these different new pieces that are Caldwell-Pope, different people that have come into the mix, it's kind of like what is the rotation? How do they play together? how are AD and LeBron James gonna work offensively together? We see at times it's LeBron James that's running things. At times it's Anthony Davis that's running things. So this is also like a time that they can really get everything ironed out before they get right into, consistently playing the top teams. We saw them play the Clippers in the beginning of the season. Of course, that's a top team. But since then, they haven't really been as tested as much. So are there any teams that you see right now that are doing better than you expected them to start the season?
Yeah, well, certainly the Phoenix Suns fall into that category. They've fallen off a little bit lately with injuries to Ricky Rubio and Aaron Baines, but they actually, at full strength, have been pretty formidable, and there's still a positive record right now, given where they've been the rest of this decade. That's a very much an encouraging sign, and their defense has been totally adequate. They're playing Devin Booker off the ball more, getting better defensive effort out of him. So Monty Williams and his staff deserve a ton of credit for their improvement. And with some of the other issues between the Blazers, Kings, Warriors, and Spurs, the Suns actually probably look like about an even money bet to make the playoffs right now. So that's one that stands out to me for sure.
Yeah, I think there are some teams, the Suns being one of them, even the Timberwolves, those teams that, as we talked about at the beginning with those 7 to 10 seeded teams in each conference, that we're just not sure how they're going to finish. And, of course, again, it's November. We don't know. We can't predict things now. We have no idea what's going to change. But these are the teams that really are competing for those final playoff spots of their conference. And looking on the West with the Suns and the Timberwolves specifically, they're making a strong case right now in how they started off the season that they could be a team that takes that 7 and 8 spot.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're helped the most, I think, just they're exceeding expectations a little bit to be, projected to be around 500. But we thought coming into the season, remember last year it was 48 wins to get into the 8th seed and 48 wins in the West. So that's not going to be the case this year, almost certainly, unless somebody really picks it up. And the Warriors, Blazers, and Spurs falling off the way they have really is not something that anybody anticipated. So, yeah, maybe we'll actually see some playoffs in the Valley of the Sun for once. That fan base is definitely starved for it.
Definitely, it's been a while. And as you mentioned, with the Thunder, Trailblazers, and Warriors, I mean, those are 3 teams. Now for Golden State, without a doubt, once Clay went down, once Kevin Durant, although he's hurt anyways and can't play, once he was traded, once he moved to Brooklyn, and then you have Steph getting hurt. We knew something. They weren't going to be as good. The dynasty was over. But to be number 15 as of today, that's a huge shock, and it's a huge testament to the change of the league right now and how the entire NBA has a new look, which is exciting. It's fun to watch. Any players?
Yeah.
I know we talked about. We've been talking about Luka and Kristaps Porzingis. We talked about LeBron and AD. We talked about Devin Booker with the Suns. Any players that have really surprised you? Maybe an individual or a pair of players on a team that are stepping up and helping their team in a way that you weren't anticipating coming into the season?
Well, first off, I would not be doing my duty as an NBA salary cap dork without telling you that you're correct that Kevin Durant actually was traded technically to Brooklyn in a sign-and trade for D'Angelo Russell. Obviously, you made the decision to go there as a free agent, but you didn't have to correct yourself. You actually were right there.
You know what? Some people are such sticklers for those terms, and I'm like, traded versus free agencies is definitely different, but yes. Thank you. That makes me feel good.
So the 2 players that have stuck out the most to me are both in the Eastern Conference. One is Pascal Siakam. Raptors 11-4 after losing Kawhi Leonard. They've also been without Kyle Lowry for the last couple of weeks, and Siakam is ascending to legitimate all-star status. I mean, he might be one of the 5 best players in the East at this point. And then the Celtics, he's injured right now, but Gordon Hayward looked pretty close to back. Really were missing on that team last year. So if he can continue to contribute at that level, they're getting more contributions from Jaylen Brown as well. Hopefully Kemba Walker will get well soon, coming off of that neck issue that he suffered in Denver over the weekend. But I think those 2 teams have been a little bit better than expected so far, and maybe you could say the Celtics, if they can make a move for another big man, could be in the mix with the Bucks and Sixers at the top of the conference when it's all said and done.
The Raptors really, and it's ironic you bring up Pascal Siakam because watching the Raptors play, you almost you can't forget that Kawhi Leonard's not there, but they still look like the championship team, you know, and it's not as big of a drop-off. I know I anticipated, all right, Kawhi Leonard's gone, they're not going to be the same team, you know, then with injuries, you know, Kyle Lowry, you don't expect them to play at that same level, but we saw Siakam have a breakout season last year, especially in the playoffs, and how he stepped up, and he's continued that same confidence and level coming into this season. Without a doubt, I mean, that's a team that a lot of people wrote off once Kawhi Leonard moved. But here they are. They're still right there. And the Celtics and the Raptors still showing that they, you know, you can't completely write them off in the Eastern Conference. Now, I do think the Bucks and Sixers are a little stronger, but who knows? It's November. I'm going to keep saying that, reiterating that.
Well, yeah,
trades happen, things crazy
sure.
happen. So, go ahead.
Yeah, Siakam, he won Most Improved Player last year, and at least when I do my fake ballot, because I don't actually have one from the NBA, but when I do my fake ballot, I make second-year players ineligible, otherwise it would be Doncic probably. But he, to me, could even win it again, or should even win it again. Mm-hmm. I mean, the skill development, he's shooting these off-the-dribble three-pointers now. I mean, they're putting the ball in his hands, you know, nearly every possession. He's taken an enormous increase in usage and shooting the ball much better. I mean, he's really maturing into a legitimate number one option for this group. It's really impressive.
Without a doubt. It's fun to watch. I think coming into the season, coming into the season, one of the things that I was really looking forward to was, you know, the change of the league. You know, having new teams that we can, you know, not knowing who's going to be the best, not knowing who's going to come out of their conference, having new teams that we can watch, as we talked about with the Suns, that could make have a stronger season than in the past, and having so many teams that are competing for those top playoff spots, you know, versus just one or two that we know, you know, come November at this time last year, we could write in who's a shoo-in to come out of their conference or at least finish on the top of their conference. So it's been very fun to watch, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So, Nate, where can our listeners follow you on social media and all the work that you're doing to keep up with your NBA coverage?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at Nate Duncan NBA. I have a daily NBA podcast called Dunked On, and then I do the once-a-week podcast with John Hollinger. He used to write for ESPN. Now he's with The Athletic, and then he was with the Memphis Grizzlies for 7 years. So he's got a true insider perspective on the league. All your NBA podcasting needs, we take care of for you.
I just have to say, I love that your show is Dunked On and your name is Duncan. I wish my last name had a cool play on words that fits with basketball. Dunked On Duncan. I mean, that doesn't get any better than that. That's creative. I don't know if I would have saw that and put that together. But thank you so much for joining the show this week. It's been a pleasure having you on to get into what's going on in the league, the future of the league, and some special players and teams that we've seen so far to start the season.